ruins of the Giza Plateau, something may be waiting to be found. Not a legend, not a guess pulled from ancient mythology. Something that researchers claim to have detected, measured, and mapped using some of the most advanced imaging technology available to science today. Something that, if it is real, mainstream archaeology has not adequately explained, has not fully investigated, and in some cases has actively refused to explore at all. Now, here's the honest version of the question, because honesty is what makes this story stronger, not weaker. We do not yet know for certain that these underground discoveries are real. The claims are disputed, the data is contested, but the claims exist. The technology behind them is real, and the structures the scans are pointing toward, whatever they ultimately turn out to be, sit directly beneath one of the most famous and most tightly controlled sites on Earth. So, in an age where we can image the surface of Mars in extraordinary detail, why are independent scientists still not permitted to properly investigate what may be sitting directly beneath the pyramids? That question deserves an answer. And tonight we are going to press for one, because over the next few minutes you are going to learn about 3 separate discoveries beneath these pyramids, each found with a different technology, and not one of them has been allowed to be fully investigated. By the time we reach the last one, you may never look at the Great Pyramid the same way again, so stay with me. The announcement. In March of 2025, a team of Italian and Scottish researchers made an announcement that sent shockwaves through both the scientific community and the broader public. Professor Corrado Malanga of the University of Pisa and Dr. Filippo Biondi of the University of Strathclyde, working alongside researcher Armando May, revealed the results of a synthetic aperture radar survey they say was conducted beneath the Pyramid of Khafra at Giza. What they described was, by any reasonable standard, extraordinary. According to the team, their scans indicated a massive subterranean complex extending beneath the Giza Plateau. 8 large cylindrical structures, which they describe as wells, descending roughly 648 meters below the surface, wrapped in spiral pathways. 5 multi-level chamber structures near the pyramid's base connected by geometric passageways. 2 enormous cube-shaped formations at the bottom, each measuring roughly 80 meters per side, and a network of tunnels potentially linking structures beneath all 3 of the major pyramids, stretching nearly 2 kilometers in total. Structures whose size and precise geometric arrangement, the team stated, could not be explained as natural geological formations. It sounds incredible, and that is exactly why you need to hear the next part before you believe a single word of it. Because there is a serious problem with this story, and most of the videos flooding your feed have quietly chosen to leave it out. These findings have not been confirmed by independent excavation, and they have not been independently verified by other scientists. The 2025 claims were presented at a press conference and released through a press statement, not through a new peer-reviewed scientific paper. One of the most widely shared images supporting the claim, a dramatic cross-section of the pyramid with the structures beneath it, was later shown to be generated by artificial intelligence, not a real scan. And Corrado Malanga, one of the lead researchers, is a figure with a complicated public profile. He is a retired professor of organic chemistry, and he is also known for his involvement in research into UFO phenomena and alien abduction claims, subjects that sit well outside the boundaries of mainstream science. So why are we still here? Why does any of this matter if the work has not been verified and if one of the key researchers holds views most scientists would dismiss outright? The answer is the most important part of this entire story. So let me show you exactly why this refuses to go away. Why it still matters, because here is the part that the easy dismissals tend to skip over. The technology itself is real. Synthetic aperture radar is not a fringe instrument. It is a genuine, widely used class of radar technology. The same broad family of tools used to map planetary surfaces and to monitor the slow movements of bridges, dams, and ground. Dr. Filippo Biondi is a real specialist in radar signal processing with published, peer-reviewed work to his name. in 2022, he and Malanga published a paper in the respected journal Remote Sensing, describing a method that uses synthetic aperture radar to study the inside of the Great Pyramid. But here, we have to be careful and accurate, because this is where a lot of the online versions of this story go wrong. The 2022 paper did not simply confirm things we already knew. It claimed to reveal previously unknown internal structures, and those claims, too, have not been independently verified. So the honest position is this: the technology is legitimate. The researchers behind it are real. But the specific, dramatic conclusions, both in 2022 and in 2025, remain unconfirmed and contested. And that is exactly why this story deserves more investigation, not less. Not because Malanga has all the answers, not because the underground city interpretation is necessarily correct, it very well may not be, but because real instruments are pointing at something. The data keeps producing the same anomalous shapes across multiple passes. And the one thing that could settle the question, independent verification, is precisely the thing that has not been allowed to happen. So ask yourself this: if a researcher with unconventional personal beliefs produces data using a real scientific tool, does his worldview on its own make the data disappear? Of course not. It does not make the data correct either. It simply means the data has to be tested by someone else. And so far, it has not been. So what exactly did these scans claim to show? Because the specifics are far stranger than the headlines let on. What the scans claim to show. Let us look at what the scans are claimed to show, because the specifics are genuinely striking, as long as we keep the word claimed firmly in mind. The method the team uses does not work the way most people imagine. It does not shine a beam through solid rock like an X-ray. Instead, the researchers say their technique processes radar data to detect tiny vibrations in the ground, vibrations caused by background seismic activity and the constant rumble of the nearby city. By analyzing how those vibrations move through the material below, their software attempts to reconstruct a three-dimensional picture of what is down there. It is less like a photograph and more like a model built from motion, and that distinction matters enormously because it is also the source of the biggest doubt. According to the team, the March 2025 reconstruction did not show a vague blur. They described clearly defined geometric forms, vertical shafts, horizontal chambers with measurable dimensions, symmetrical layouts. The largest features, those two cube-shaped formations, are described as sitting at a depth of roughly 648 meters, each about 80 meters per side. To put that in perspective, 80 meters is close to the length of a city block. If the reconstruction is accurate, these are not small anomalies, they are enormous. If. And that one small word is where the whole story is about to crack wide open. The problem of depth. Here is the single most important criticism, the one we have to take seriously if we want to be honest. Professor Lawrence Conyers of the University of Denver is one of the world's leading experts on ground-penetrating radar. He was actually asked to peer review the team's earlier 2022 paper. His verdict was measured. He found the underlying method interesting, even promising. But he said the conclusions were difficult to follow, buried in pages of complex mathematics, and he was deeply skeptical that any radar-based technique could reliably reach and resolve structures at the depths being claimed. In his own extensive field experience, he's been able to see only around 10 meters down before the signal fades. The idea of imaging clear structures hundreds of meters below the surface, he has said, is a huge exaggeration. He is not alone. Other specialists have pointed out that this class of method reliably images only a meter or two beneath the surface in conditions like these, and they warn of a subtle trap. When you process a weak signal heavily enough, noise can begin to resemble structure. With enough mathematical modeling, randomness can start to look like architecture. In other words, the very thing that makes these images so compelling, their crisp geometric clarity, could, in theory, be created by the processing itself. rather than by anything in the ground. The Biondi and Malanga team rejects this. They argue that their approach is fundamentally different from conventional ground-penetrating radar, that it operates on different physical principles, and that it is genuinely capable of resolving features at great depth. They insist their methodology is grounded in established science. So, who is right? Here is the uncomfortable truth. From the outside, we cannot say. This is a dispute between specialists, and it can be resolved in exactly one way: independent verification. Someone else, with no stake in the outcome, needs to bring comparable instruments to the same spot and see whether they find the same thing. That has not happened. And the reason it has not happened is where this story stops being about radar and starts being about something far harder to explain: the access problem. Getting permission to run this kind of independent survey on the Giza Plateau is extraordinarily difficult. And in this particular case, the response from Egyptian authorities was not quiet uncertainty, it was flat rejection. Dr. Zahi Hawass, the country's most prominent and most powerful Egyptologist, dismissed the underground claims as baseless and stated plainly that no permit had been granted for this radar study at the Khafra Pyramid in the first place. Now, you can read that two ways, and an honest video has to put both on the table. The first reading is simple. The authorities rejected the claims because the claims are weak, unverified, and made by a team including a researcher known for fringe theories. That is a completely reasonable position, and it may well be the correct one. But there is a second reading, and it is harder to shake the longer you study the history of this place. Because what we are looking at is not an isolated event. It is a pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The pattern. In 1993, German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robotic camera up one of the narrow internal shafts of the Great Pyramid. At the end of that shaft, it found something no one had ever seen: a small sealed stone slab fitted with two worn copper fittings, blocking the way forward. A door. The discovery made international headlines. The world held its breath. And then the project was shut down, access was withdrawn, and the investigation went quiet for nearly a decade. When a camera was finally pushed past that first slab in 2002, it revealed yet another stone barrier immediately behind it. And to this day, that inner door has never been passed. Whatever lies beyond it remains unknown. Hold that thought, because it gets stranger. In 2017, an international team of physicists used muon tomography, a particle-based scanning method built on completely different principles from radar, and detected a genuinely enormous, previously unknown void inside the Great Pyramid, sitting just above the Grand Gallery. This was not a fringe announcement. It was published in the journal Nature, one of the most respected scientific journals in the world. The void is described as at least 30 meters long, with a cross-section similar to the Grand Gallery itself, large enough that some compared it to the size of an aircraft. International headlines, genuine excitement. And then once again, no excavation, no camera sent inside, no real follow-up. The void simply sits there, dark and unexplored, inside the most famous structure ever built by human hands. Now add the March 2025 radar claims, more headlines, more extraordinary data, and depending on how you count it, either more silence or more dismissal. So at what point does a pattern start to look like a policy? And here's where I want to hear from you directly, because this is your story as much as it is mine. If you believe the answers beneath Giza should not stay locked behind sealed doors and quiet refusals, type these 3 words in the comments right now. Let us look. That is it. Let us look. I read every single comment on this channel, and here is why it genuinely matters. The more voices that gather behind that simple demand, the harder this conversation becomes to ignore. A sealed door can outlast a single curious person. It cannot so easily outlast 100,000 of them asking the same question at once. So drop it below, let us look, and then stay with me, because what comes next is the part almost no one is talking about. What is at stake? Before we get to it, ask yourself why anyone would want these doors to stay shut at all. Because the answer is bigger than archaeology. Egypt's tourism industry is one of the central pillars of its economy, drawing millions of visitors and enormous revenue every year. That entire industry rests on a specific settled story. The pyramids were built roughly 4,500 years ago by the ancient Egyptians as the crowning achievement of that civilization. Now imagine, hypothetically, that excavation beneath the plateau revealed structures that predated the dynastic Egyptians by thousands of years, built to a level of scale and precision that challenged everything we believe about early human capability. The implications would not stop at a single archaeological site. They would ripple through the foundations of how we understand human history. They would force the rewriting of textbooks, the revising of museum exhibits, and the rethinking of timelines taught in every university on Earth. Academic careers are built on the current version of that story. Institutions are funded on it. National identity is tied to it. The reluctance to look too closely at evidence that might unravel all of that is not necessarily a conspiracy. It may simply be human nature operating at the scale of an entire institution. And that is precisely why independent investigation matters so much. The people with the most to lose from a paradigm-shifting discovery are, too often, the very people who control access to the place where it might be made. But not every discovery here rests on disputed radar and contested claims. One of them is rock solid, peer-reviewed, confirmed by two separate technologies, and almost no one is talking about it. The discovery on firmer ground. In 2024, a joint team of researchers from Japan's Higashi Nippon International University, Tohoku University, and Egypt's National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics published a peer-reviewed paper in the respected journal Archaeological Prospection. This is the important distinction. This was not a press release. This was properly reviewed, properly documented science. What they examined was an oddly empty patch of ground in Giza's Western Cemetery, a heavily studied burial field packed with the rectangular tombs known as mastabas that researchers have worked in for over a century. Yet, right in the middle of it, sat a blank, flat rectangle with no structures on the surface and no record of excavation, as if, for some reason, this one spot had quietly been left alone. So the team scanned beneath it using two well-established, widely trusted methods, ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography. What they found beneath that empty patch should not have been there. Just beneath the surface, between roughly 0.5 meter and 2 meters down, the scans revealed a clearly defined L-shaped structure around 10 meters across. According to lead researcher Motoyuki Sato, the corners were too geometrically sharp to be a natural formation, and the space appeared to have been deliberately backfilled with sand after it was built, meaning someone constructed it and then covered it over. Then they looked deeper, and at a depth of roughly 5 to 10 meters, the instruments detected a second, larger anomaly with a signature consistent with an open cavity or loosely packed material rather than solid rock. The researchers were careful, as good scientists are. They did not announce an underground city. They did not claim to know what these structures were. They described exactly what the scans showed, noted the shapes, were inconsistent with natural processes, and called for excavation to find out. That excavation has been discussed, but as of this recording, no major confirmed findings have been publicly released. A peer-reviewed discovery of a geometrically precise hidden structure deliberately buried in an unexplored corner of one of the most famous sites on Earth, confirmed by two independent scanning methods, has been sitting quietly in a scientific journal for 2 years. And the world has largely moved on. Why is that not a bigger story? And why does the same thing keep happening over and over every single time someone points an instrument at this plateau? They have been wrong. Before here is the context that ties all of it together, and it is one the history of archaeology itself demands we take seriously. A little over 20 years ago, if you had claimed that a complex of monumental carved stone structures existed in southeastern Turkey, dating back more than 11,000 years, to a time when mainstream archaeology insisted humans were simple hunter-gatherers incapable of organized construction, you would have been laughed out of the room. Today, that site, Göbekli Tepe, is one of the most celebrated archaeological discoveries of the modern era. Its oldest layers date back roughly 11,600 years, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids by thousands of years. It is fully accepted, and it has fundamentally rewritten the timeline of human civilization. Nearby, a related site called Karahan Tepe has since been excavated and confirmed as equally ancient and equally sophisticated. Together, they forced the entire field to confront a humbling truth. We do not actually know how far back the story of complex human civilization goes. Given that, is it really so unreasonable to ask whether there might be more beneath the sands of Giza than the official narrative admits? Is it radical to insist that structures flagged by multiple independent teams, using multiple different technologies, deserve proper, transparent, fully funded investigation? It is not radical. It is simply the scientific method doing its job. What real investigation would look like, and here is what that would actually look like. An independent international team of geophysicists, archaeologists, and remote sensing specialists, with no institutional stake in confirming or denying any particular version of history, granted full access to survey the plateau using every non-invasive tool available. Muon tomography, ground-penetrating radar, seismic imaging, electrical resistivity tomography, synthetic aperture radar. The full toolkit, side by side, checking each other's results. All of it published openly in peer-reviewed journals, available to any scientist on Earth who wants to examine the raw data. Not announced at press conferences, not filtered through a government press office, not selectively handed to friendly media. Open, transparent, auditable, and if that data confirms real structures below, excavation permits granted on the basis of scientific merit, not politics. This is not an outrageous demand. It is how archaeology is supposed to work, and how it does work at almost every other major site on the planet. The reason it does not work that way at Giza is not a scientific reason, and that is exactly why the public conversation matters. Because when enough people ask the question loudly and persistently, eventually the doors become harder to keep shut. Conclusion. So let us be clear-eyed about where we stand. Corrado Malanga's interpretation may be wrong. His radar claims may not survive independent testing at all. But the test still has not been run. The Japanese team followed every rule of rigorous science, and their peer-reviewed findings still describes a deliberately hidden structure that no one has yet dug up. Rudolf Gantenbrink's robot found a sealed door in 1993 that still has not been opened. A void, at least 30 meters long, was confirmed inside the Great Pyramid in 2017, and still no one has gone inside. None of those facts depend on who first noticed them. None of them disappear because the people in charge of the site would rather look the other way. They simply sit there, waiting, patient in the way that only stone can be patient. The pyramids have stood for 4,500 years. Whatever questions remain beneath them have been waiting far longer than that. We owe it to our own curiosity and to the integrity of the scientific method to stop accepting silence and dismissal as if they were answers. The investigation needs to happen. The access needs to be granted. The data needs to be public. And until it is, the most honest and most powerful thing any of us can do is keep asking the question, what is down there? And why won't anyone let us look? If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of curious person this story needs. So, if you have not already, type it with me one more time in the comments. Let us look. Subscribe if you want to follow this story as it develops, because the moment those doors finally open, you are going to want to be in the room when it happens. This is not the end of the conversation, it is the beginning.